Today, we've got Brad Kelsey with us. He's he's a financial professional with World Financial Group who's going to be talking to us a little bit about what's his opinion about this statement that Kevin O'Leary has made. Brad, are you there?
I am. Good morning, Davelle. How are you?
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So, what are your thoughts on Kevin O'Leary's statement? Do we all need to have $5 million in the bank?
It's very interesting because I think it's a different type of lifestyle that maybe he's accustomed to. And, a lot of our models that we work with are, if you think about actually, Canada, Stats Canada now says that most financial institutions will say that you need about 1.7, 1.8, between 1.7 and 1.8 to retire comfortably in Canada, depending on lifestyle. But then there's other models that say less than that. So I think, I think the freedom aspect of what he's saying, maybe not having to depend on any investments or anything like that, potentially. But even then, I think just looking at 100,000 a year, even indexed, I got to think is going to be a pretty lush lifestyle to have the 5 million there.
Wow. So that's when you say $100,000 a year, that's what you sort of budget for people in retirement, that they need to have $100,000 a year to be able to live off of?
Well, a lot of people, what I find when you think about what we talk about a lot with people retiring, it's the idea is that hopefully their mortgage is gone or extremely low. And then so a lot of the different expenses that they'll have during their retirement years are different than what they have during their peak earning years. Just things are people are able to, narrow things down a little bit, and it's not quite like it maybe. Yeah, sure, food may be higher over time than it used to be, stuff like that. But there's a lot of other expenses that you're not going to have that people don't think of. So that's what we try and guide them through to realize expenses will streamline a little bit, and then that way, when people are pulling money, and they're likely to get taxed less. So a lot of people, what we see, a lot of people go, if I could have 8,000 to 9,000, anywhere in that range a month, they feel with no mortgage and some of the other expenses gone, they can live pretty comfortably here in Canada.
Wow. And so how many years these days are financial professionals budgeting for people to live? Because if you retire at 60, how many years are you trying to fund in your retirement?
So believe it or not, the average age still, Stats Canada will say, is around eight. Life expectancy would be around 85. That's kind of what we budget. We go 85 and we also use 90 models depending on the people that we're talking with.
Mm-hmm.
If you still look today, and I think I've actually lived it, I'm seeing, some of my parents and my wife's parents, the average age for a male still in Canada, life expectancy is around 82, 83, and a female is around 84, 85. So it's still, they're still holding that number despite all the, potential longevity, life longevity that we hear going on out there. Those are still kind of the models that we're budgeting for, but around 85 and age 90. So in that case, say someone who's 65 or 60, in that case that you just mentioned,
mm-hmm.
they're probably looking around 25 years to fund. So 25 to 30 years is usually the model that we're working with.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm surprised when you had mentioned the averages for men were about 82 and women for 84, because I was thinking that the average life expectancy for women was going to be in the 90s. We tend to outlive our men.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think women are smarter, and I think women take care of themselves a little more than men.
Good answer.
So I think that participates for it. Yeah.
Interesting. And so basically that $100,000, you're saying your mortgage is paid off, you're just spending money on sort of your food, your living, and your travel, and that's why $100,000 seems to be enough. But what about the people who have not paid off their mortgage? Because we're certainly hearing about that more and more these days, that, our mortgages, it's so much more expensive to live that people are not paying off their mortgages by the time they retire. So for people who haven't paid off their mortgages by the time they're retired, how much more do you think they need instead of the 100,000? What's the other number?
Yeah, 100%. It's a great point, and you're right. We are seeing that. So there are a couple different options there. Typically, it may be in the 150 range. It could be in the 200 range. So even let me just say, in our model kind of that we work with, and that's averaging. Now we are still factoring in that. I would never recommend, nor do I intend with my own money, to be able to sit there just with cash, liquid, and just pulling from it. I hate money kind of sitting there getting dusty. So I think so. If you have a lump sum of money like that, so $2 million would be a very healthy amount to have, and even less. And then having that earning interest over time is going to help sustain the money that someone has while they're drawing on it. We see that a lot with some of the people that are going through retirement now, that they've been or have been in retirement now for 10, 12 years. They've been able to sustain still the amount of money right around the neighborhood of the same amount of money they put in back then, and with what they've been drawing, and be able to live the lifestyle they're looking for, but also having that money stay there just because of the returns they've been getting on their investments. So I think that's a lot of the things that we'll see here with people in retirement. Is I'm going to go against the grain here. You hear a lot of people say when people get to retirement or you get close to 60, start to get really conservative and get into bonds and GICs and things like that. You want to protect your money.
Right.
That's been the playbook for decades and decades and decades. More so, in my opinion, because I think the financial industry wants to cover their butt. If we look at history, the last 100 years, there's been any disaster you could think about, and in those periods, each disaster was kind of the worst thing. So sometimes people go, yeah, but this is different. Well, back then it was different too. And still, everything always recovered, and the money was there. So I think I have a lot of confidence in at least my plan personally, with even my own stuff, is that I will still keep it invested. And yes, sure, there'll be dips and things like that during times, but I believe that it should sustain over time. If we look at history of the last 100 years, I'm going to go on the side of history versus say what Fox News wants to tell me. So,
okay, but what if I'm a bit of a nervous Nelly and I think about 2008 when the stock market crashed, and I always tell people, I think, okay, so what if I was 75 in the year 2008, the stock market crashes, and all of a sudden my money is gone? Shouldn't I be a little bit stressed out about things like that?
Great question. Yeah, I lived through that myself too, and I was down. I'll tell you my personal situation. I was down about 40% in 3 weeks, and had I kept my money there and not touched it, then by the fall, less than a year, so 10 months later, I would have been back exactly where I was.
Amazing.
Now, yes, someone's 75 and they're drawing their money. That's going to bring it down a little bit, absolutely. But still, I think that they will still end up sustaining a lot more than, say, someone who is sitting in a fixed rate GIC or in a savings account, cash, that's just taking and drawing down the money and exhausting that money.
Wow, that's incredible. Any last tips or things that you think people should know before we close out?
Yeah, I think just it's funny. I think a lot of people have the misconception of where things can go. Just stay. Like what I say is always just stay the course. It's timing. It's time in the market, not timing the market. And one of the things he said in the article that I do agree with is I think a lot of people have a consumption mentality, and it is hard to build that first little nest egg. But when you do, start to don't deprive yourself, but don't just chase, don't buy all the lattes all the time. Save, make your lunch. Those things do add up little by little by little. Those things stack up. And then you start to save a bunch of money. When you get a little lump sum, even your first 100,000, he talked about your first million, but when you get your first 100,000, you actually start to see that the rule of 72 compound interest start to work in your favor. And then all of a sudden, by leaps and bounds, you're going to start to grow that money. And then eventually down the road, you're going to have that first million. And then even more compound is going to happen for you. So yeah, I would say get out of the consumption mentality and really work hard to build that first little lump sum and then watch what it can do after that. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Brad. Great to have you here. Appreciate you having me, Davelle.
Awesome.
Have a great day.
Thank you.